Greetings and salutations to all you folks out there. Today I'm going to be giving you a little bit of an opinion about Halo Wars 2. Been playing through the campaign and quite a bit of multiplayer. Actually, the campaign is up on the channel if you wish to go watch that and see for yourself a little bit of the gameplay, although some of it is going to be playing in the background here. And as the campaign wrapped up, there were a bunch of people who asked me, what is my opinion on the game as a whole? Is it worth buying? You know, after you finish the campaign and tried everything out, what do you think of it? So I actually want to start this discussion by talking a little bit about the remastered edition of Halo Wars. I had a fantastic time playing through that game again. So many memories coming back. The updated graphics looked great. There were a few missions that brought back painful memories of some of the random happenstance that goes on while you're trying to do some of the survival type missions or whatnot, and some of just the utterly RNG elements where you might win and you might not, just depending on whether something went a certain way or not. But it was an intriguing story to play back through. Great campaign experience. Had a fantastic time. No regrets at all. And then I jump into Halo Wars 2. So right off the bat, as I got into it, the graphics, amazing. The opening cinematics and getting you into the story, incredible. The initial experience, when you get in, you open up that menu, you get everything set up, and then you launch into the campaign. It feels great, but it just really doesn't hold up as you play through it. As I went through the campaign, I realized more and more that the campaign was entirely pushed by the cinematics, and the gameplay was so completely generic. As a specific example, in the original Halo Wars, when you discover the Flood, you go into a mission without real clear objectives. Of course, you know the Flood are going to be there. You've played Halo. You know who the bad guys are in the universe. You know what you're going to run into in the back of your mind. But you go into this mission, you start exploring the area, the suspense builds, you discover the Flood, and then it's survival. And all of the campaign missions, they flow from one into the next, into the next, into the next, with minimal cutscenes and all of the character development and story driven through the gameplay. There's not really any pointless sections in the original Halo Wars. And when you get to the new Halo Wars, 100% of the story, all of the character development, which is at some points laughable, if I'm being completely honest here, and everything that moves the game happens in the cutscenes. So you get these beautiful cinematics, and then it dumps you into one of 3 game modes, some of which are repeated multiple times back to back in missions, where you'll play like 3 survival missions in a row with the same objectives and the same basic units given to you, maybe one new one just to throw a little bit of a mix in. And it's not even good survival. It's bad survival missions. They're boring as all get out to play in some cases. And it's just this generic gameplay that starts when the cutscene ends, and then the cutscene jumps back in as soon as you finish the mission objective. And what's happening in the cutscene is not even what you were doing in the game. In one of the missions, I finished the mission just barely. I mean, it was a by the skin of your teeth finish with only like 2 units alive. I almost lost the thing, and then it goes into the closing cutscene, and it's just a generic large-scale battlefield shot with tons of units and all of this fighting going on, and then it rolls right into the next cinematic, and it completely breaks you out of the game. It's just such a bad experience. And when you're looking at the cutscenes, it's some of the most badass stuff that I've ever seen come out of the Halo franchise, as far as what the Spartans are doing and how they're handling combat and the story that's going on behind the scenes. It's good. I mean, it's not really a generic story. It is engaging. But when you're watching it in little 2-minute segments and then you go into gameplay that you're just grinding out to get to the next cutscene, it's worthless. It is completely and totally worthless. This is one of those cases where the game mechanics matter so much more. If all you have is a good story, you don't have a video game, you have a movie. I would have paid full price for a ticket to go see this story as a film. If somebody fleshed the whole thing out and put it in front of me on the big screen, I would watch the hell out of it because it's a good story and it's got epic action, but it is a bad campaign. And I guess that's my opinion on the campaign itself. And then you get to the end of it and it just cuts off in the middle of everything. There's no wrap up. There's no tying up loose ends. There's no, to be continued type thing other than just, fading to black after. Well, I'm not gonna spoil the ending specifically here. If you guys watch the campaign series, you know how it ends and how I felt at that moment. But it just feels like the whole epic story is just snatched out from under you. And supposedly there is going to be a paid DLC. Are you kidding me? That has some more of the Banished storyline. And then from what I hear, it may be correct or not, but that the Halo Wars 2 campaign cuts off at the intro to the Halo 6 storyline. So the games are supposed to flow into each other. And at that point, I would ask, why the hell am I paying full price for a game that has like a prelude to the story for a real game in it as a campaign? Like, why is that even a thing? Why can't I have the whole story? Why are you trying to tie different genres of games together with a story that cuts off in one and begins in another? Like, the people who are playing the first-person shooter Halo, yeah, there's some overlap, but that's not the same player base that was psyched about the RTS portion of it. There's a lot of RTS players that are not necessarily Halo fans, but enjoyed the original Halo Wars. So there's just like this complete disconnect. And this is starting to get a little bit rambly, but I'm just trying to get all of my thoughts out there because it's such a conflicting experience playing this game, because there's some portions of it that are so good, and then there's others that are just awful and just leave you hanging. So as far as the gameplay in the campaign, it's all right. It's way too rock, paper, scissors for my taste. I mean, they went full blown, this unit trumps this one and does barely any, if any at all, damage, to its counter type. So you have to mix your units and you have to respond with a different unit type based on what your opponent is building. And sometimes intel is a little difficult to get, but it works out in the end okay in the campaign. But then when you move over to multiplayer, I didn't like it. That's probably a personal thing. That's probably me being used to playing more grand scale strategy games and not being incredibly micro intensive and, paying attention second to second on exactly what your unit type composition should be, and, having to micromanage to a great degree where certain units should be in your mix. But it didn't work for me at all. I don't like the experience of having to beg for intel and then I'm just straight up going to lose, even if I have twice the economy of the other player, if I don't exactly counter his unit type. And then in the multiplayer specifically, I played a lot of games. I spent 4 or 5 days playing as many matches as I could without, throwing my mouse through the window. I think I probably played 17 or 18 matches relatively back to back, and then a few more here and there. And overall, the feel I got for it was that, generally speaking, map control doesn't really matter, at least not at the skill level that's playing the game right now, which I guess, there isn't really a defined meta game, and matchmaking is not very alive. You really can only get matches in a couple of game modes or in Blitz. The rest of it's just abandoned. There aren't enough people playing it to actually get multiplayer team games going and stuff like that. But it just felt way too rock, paper, scissory, and way too much like you just kind of sit in your base and you don't really expand that much, and you just tech up and get an experimental unit as fast as possible and just hope to God that you have the correct unit mix to go against what your opponent's building. And of course, if you get someone versus someone that's exactly at your skill level, most of the lower ranked matches I feel like are completely decided by cheese. Who knows which unit does more damage, and just being able to squash your opponent because he doesn't know how to react. I got into a few matches that ended up being prolonged, and the map expansion ended up mattering a little more. But in the end, it was just kind of, we fought and we fought and we fought until finally the war of attrition ended up with one of us having a few less units. And then once the steamroll starts, there's really no way to come back, because there's just nothing that you can do with the size of the map and how low the unit cap is. Once you lose, you've lost completely. And it's just not a good feel to a multiplayer for me. Blitz, I only played a few games of. I wasn't super interested in it, just not really my thing. But I know that there are a lot of people who play game modes like that in other games. And so I'm not really going to put an opinion out there on that specific function. Go watch a video on Halo Wars Blitz and make your own mind up on that. I'm not going to have anything to do with it. So, Brink, what's your opinion overall? Should I get Halo Wars 2? Is the campaign worth playing? All of those questions. I would honestly say that unless you're just really hell-bent on getting a little bit more of what the original Halo Wars had to offer, I would pass this one up. The campaign is boring to play mechanically. You can get the story online, just watch the cinematics. It's not worth paying $60 for, 15 minutes worth of cinematics that are really, really, really good. That is a stupid buy-in price. And then when you get to the multiplayer, it's still got low unit caps. It's got even worse rock, paper, scissor elements. And the UI is pretty bad. The hotkeys are hard to deal with. It's hard to get things organized. There's features missing that should be way easier. Or it should be way easier to control your units, I guess is the way I should say. And then specifically speaking to the PC version, it is bug-ridden. It crashed quite a few times. It lost my saves once. And there are features in it that are utterly broken. For instance, the minimap does not work properly, because if you click on the minimap, it actually clicks on the screen underneath the minimap. So if there is a building or a unit under where you click on the minimap, it may or may not move you to that location on the minimap. Sometimes I couldn't even click on the minimap to move the camera, which is utterly annoying, because then you have to deal with manually panning or just going close and then panning. And then it may or may not activate the unit underneath where you clicked. So if you drag select and then click the minimap to go somewhere, it will deselect the units because it selected the one under the minimap, and then it will shoot your camera way over there. So it's just a buggy mess as far as a lot of that stuff goes. So I would just say you gotta be super dedicated to want this title at full price, and I definitely would not recommend it. I have a pile of problems with it. And just as an aside, this game kind of killed my hopes for gaming this year. I was so very much looking forward to this because Halo is good at telling is a good universe to tell stories in. You know there's going to be a good story, and in this game there was. It was just badly executed with the campaign. You know there's going to be a good story. I liked the mechanics of the original Halo Wars enough that I thought that buying into the new one was worth it. And the mechanics are objectively worse, and it is way the hell buggier than the original one was. And then there just isn't anything to keep me there. I'm done with the campaign. I've played the multiplayer, and I may not ever play Halo again, or Halo Wars 2 again. So those are my thoughts on it. I'm not going to say that as my opinion because there was a lot of conflicting information in there, but hopefully having listened to this whole rant and ramble, you've got a pretty good idea of where I stand on the game. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I do sincerely apologize if I dashed your hopes for the next entry in this series, and I will see you in the next one.